I stood in the center of the plush, corner office, holding a cardboard box that contained 10 years of my life. My new boss, Julian, didn't even have the decency to look me in the eye. He was 28, wore a suit that cost more than my car, and was busy tapping away on his tablet. The air conditioning hummed, filling the silence that stretched between us. "It's nothing personal, Caleb," Julian said, finally glancing up with a bored expression. "We are restructuring the department. Your salary is significantly higher than the industry average for a systems architect. We need to be lean. We're trimming the fat." The words hung in the air like a bad smell. Trimming the fat. I had built the Apex logistics database from the ground up. I had coded the routing algorithms that saved this company millions every year. I had spent nights sleeping under my desk during server migrations. Now, I was just fat to be cut. "Julian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't understand how the legacy system works. It requires specific oversight. You can't just hand this off to the junior team." Julian smirked, waving his hand dismissively. "We have the documentation, dinosaur. Security is already here to escort you. Please leave your badge on the desk." I looked at the security guard, a man I had shared coffee with for 5 years, who now looked at me with pity. I felt a cold knot of humiliation tighten in my stomach. 2. The walk to the elevator was the longest of my life. The open plan office was deadly silent. My team, the people I had trained, mentored, and defended, kept their heads down, terrified that making eye contact with me would put a target on their backs. Julian followed us to the elevator banks, probably to make sure I didn't steal a stapler on my way out. As the security guard pressed the down button, a thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. The daily encryption rotation. I turned back to Julian, keeping my foot in the elevator door. "Julian, wait. The daily seed phrase. The system locks automatically at midnight if the admin doesn't manually input the rolling code. You need the token." Julian let out a loud, barking laugh that echoed through the quiet office. "Oh, please," he sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Do you really think you're that important? That the whole company revolves around you typing in a password? We have the manual. We don't need your magic words. Get out." The elevator door slid shut, cutting off his arrogant face. My heart was pounding against my ribs. He hadn't read the manual. If he had, he would know the manual only explained how to input the code, not what the code was. He had just locked himself out of his own house. 3. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The rage was starting to replace the shock. I pulled into my driveway, walked into my dark living room, and set the cardboard box on the floor. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on my couch and stared at my laptop bag. Inside that bag was a small, black physical security token, a device the size of a thumb drive. It generated a unique, 6-digit code every 24 hours that kept the Apex database live. It was a dead man's switch. I had designed it 5 years ago after a massive cyber attack. The logic was simple: if the lead admin, me, was compromised, kidnapped, or unable to verify their identity, the system would assume a threat and lock down the entire database to prevent data theft. It required a human touch every single day. I looked at the clock. It was 6 p.m. The system reset at midnight. All I had to do to destroy Julian's career was absolutely nothing. I picked up the token, tossed it into my junk drawer, and walked to the kitchen to open a beer. I wasn't hacking the company. I wasn't sabotaging them. I was simply honoring my termination. I was fat that had been trimmed. And fat doesn't type in codes. 4. I sat in my living room, watching the digital clock on the cable box tick toward midnight. 11:58, 11:59, 12 o'clock. I took a sip of my beer. I closed my eyes and imagined the scene unfolding at the Apex headquarters. The night shift logistics managers would be processing thousands of shipping orders for trucks across the country. Drivers were waiting at loading docks for manifests. Suddenly, the screens would flicker. A red banner would appear across every monitor in the building: admin authentication required. System lockdown in T-10 seconds. The staff would panic. They would frantically type on their keyboards, but nothing would work. They would call the IT desk, but the junior admins wouldn't have the token. Then, the countdown would hit 0. The screens would go black. The database would encrypt itself into a jagged, unreadable mess. Millions of dollars in inventory would effectively vanish into a digital void. Trucks wouldn't know where to go. Perishable goods would sit on docks. It was a catastrophe of biblical proportions. And Julian, the man who knew everything, was probably asleep in his penthouse, dreaming of his bonus, completely unaware that he had just steered the Titanic into an iceberg. 5. I slept late the next morning, enjoying the first restful sleep I'd had in a decade. I woke up around 10 a.m. and stretched, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. I walked to the kitchen, made a pot of coffee, and finally turned on my phone. It vibrated so hard it nearly fell off the counter. 47 missed calls, 82 text messages, all from the company, some from the junior admins, some from the HR director, and about 20 from Julian. I didn't answer any of them. I put the phone on, do not disturb, and turned on the television. I flipped to the business news channel. I almost dropped my coffee mug. The ticker at the bottom of the screen was flashing red. Logistics giant, Apex, suffering major outage. Supply chain halted nationwide. A reporter was standing outside the Apex headquarters, looking grave. Trucks are lined up for miles, she said into the microphone. Sources say the entire internal database has gone dark. The company is losing an estimated $500,000 per hour. I took a sip of coffee. The coffee tasted excellent. This wasn't just a glitch, it was a national news event. Julian wanted to be famous. Well, now everyone knew his company's name. 6. My phone buzzed again, bypassing the silent mode because the caller called 3 times in a row. It was Julian. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, the notification popped up. I pressed play, putting it on speaker so I could hear it while I made pancakes. Julian's voice was high-pitched and breathless. He sounded like a man drowning. Caleb, pick up the phone. We know you did this. We know you sabotaged the system. I have legal looking into this right now. If you don't unlock the database in 10 minutes, I am sending the police to your door. You are going to prison for cyberterrorism, you hear me? Call me back. I smiled and saved the voicemail. It was a beautiful piece of evidence. He was threatening me. He was accusing me of a crime I didn't commit. I hadn't touched the system. I hadn't written a line of malicious code. I had simply followed his instructions to leave the building and relinquish my duties. His accusation was slander. I took a bite of my pancake. It was a little dry, but it tasted like victory. He was doubling down instead of apologizing. That was his mistake. He was digging his grave deeper with every empty threat. 7. An hour later, there was a loud, aggressive pounding on my front door. My heart sped up for a second. Had he actually sent the police? I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It wasn't a cop. It was a man in a cheap suit holding a manila envelope. A process server. I opened the door. Caleb Vance, he asked. I nodded. He shoved the envelope into my chest and walked away without another word. I opened it. It was a cease and desist order and a threat of a lawsuit for damages. It claimed I had maliciously interfered with proprietary software. I laughed. I called my cousin, Ben, who was a contract lawyer. I sent him a picture of the document and my termination letter. Ben called me back 5 minutes later, laughing. This is a bluff, Caleb, Ben said. Your termination letter is ironclad. It says, effective immediately, all access and responsibilities are revoked. You have a legal obligation not to touch the system. If you logged in now, you would actually be breaking the law. Let him sue. We'll countersue for harassment. I felt a wave of relief. Julian was trying to bully me, but he had handed me the shield I needed to protect myself. 8. Later that afternoon, a notification popped up on my private gaming Discord server. It was Marcus, one of the junior developers I had trained. He was a good kid, smart but timid. Marcus, Caleb, are you there? Please, man. It's bad. It's really bad. I hesitated. I liked Marcus. I didn't want him to suffer. Caleb, I'm here, Marcus. What's happening? Marcus, Julian is losing it. He's making us try to brute force the encryption. He has us running script after script. I told him it wouldn't work, that it might corrupt the backups, but he won't listen. He's screaming at us. He threatened to fire the whole team. I felt a pang of guilt. My team was collateral damage in Julian's war against competence. But I knew if I stepped in now, out of the goodness of my heart, Julian would take the credit. He would say he managed the crisis. He would fire me again the moment the lights came back on. Caleb, I can't help you, Marcus. I don't work there anymore. Do not let him touch the backup drives. Document everything he tells you to do. Marcus, I'm scared, Caleb. Caleb, keep your head down. This isn't your fault. 9. The outage hit the 24-hour mark. The news reports were getting worse. The estimated losses were now over $12 million. Major clients, grocery chains, pharmaceutical companies, were canceling their contracts with Apex. The stock price had plummeted 15% in a single day of trading. I learned later that the board of directors had called an emergency meeting. They video conferenced Julian into the boardroom. They demanded answers. Why aren't the backups working? The chairman asked. Julian, sweating through his expensive shirt, lied through his teeth. It's a logic bomb, he stammered. Caleb planted a virus before he left. It's sophisticated. We are fighting a cyber attack. He was digging deeper. He was accusing a former employee of a felony to cover up his own incompetence. The board gave him an ultimatum: fix it in 6 hours or don't bother coming back. Julian was desperate. He couldn't fix it because he didn't understand what was broken. He was a manager who thought he was an engineer, and reality was finally calling his bluff. 10. Desperate to save his own skin, Julian made a fatal error. He hired an expensive, external cybersecurity firm called NetGuard to crack my encryption. They charged a $50,000 emergency fee just to open their laptops. I watched from home, monitoring the server traffic which I could still see on a public dashboard as the external team began their assault. They treated it like a hack. They tried to force their way in. But I had built the system to defend against exactly this kind of intrusion. When the external team aggressively probed the firewall, they triggered the secondary defense protocol. The data didn't just lock, it began to fragment. The system scattered the encrypted shards across 50 different remote servers to prevent theft. It was the digital equivalent of shredding a document and throwing the pieces into the wind. I watched the status bar turn from LOCKED to critical failure. The fix Julian paid for had just made the problem 10 times worse. The data wasn't just inaccessible now, it was broken. 11. Silas, the absentee CEO and owner of Apex, finally flew in from his vacation in the Maldives. Silas was a billionaire who preferred sailing to managing, but he knew when his ship was sinking. He stormed into the server room at 2 a.m., wearing a tracksuit, his face red with jet lag and anger. He found the external team staring at monitors filled with error codes. He found Julian yelling at Marcus. Silas walked up to the lead consultant from NetGuard. What is happening? He demanded. The consultant shook his head. This isn't a virus, sir. There is no malware. This is a security protocol. It's a dead man's switch. We triggered a fragmentation event. We can't crack this. Silas turned slowly to Julian. The room went deadly quiet. You told the board it was a virus, Silas said, his voice dangerously low. You told me Caleb was a hacker. He is. Julian squeaked. No, the consultant interrupted. He's a genius. He built a fortress. And you fired the only guy who has the key. 12. My phone rang at 7 a.m. the next morning. It wasn't Julian. The caller ID said, Silas Warner. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. I answered on the second ring. Hello, Silas. Caleb, Silas said. He sounded tired. We have a situation. The database is unavailable. We need you to come in and look at a glitch. I sat up in bed. He was still trying to downplay it. He didn't want to admit he was desperate. I'm sorry, Silas, I said calmly. But I was fired 2 days ago for being fat. I was told my role was redundant. I don't work for Apex anymore. And quite frankly, I'm very busy enjoying my unemployment. Silas sighed, a heavy sound of defeat. Julian made a mistake. A big one. Look, we will pay you for your time. Just come in. Please. I'm not an employee, Silas, I said. If I come in as a third-party consultant. And I set the terms. Fine, Silas snapped. Just get here. 13. I showered, shaved, and put on a pair of cargo shorts and a vintage rock band t-shirt. I drove to the office, listening to my favorite upbeat playlist. When I walked into the building, the atmosphere was apocalyptic. People were running around with stacks of paper, trying to manage logistics manually. The smell of stale coffee and fear was everywhere. I took the elevator up to the executive floor. The doors opened, and Julian was waiting there. He looked like he hadn't slept in 48 hours. His eyes were bloodshot, and his tie was undone. He glared at me with pure hatred. You think this is funny? He hissed. I walked past him without breaking stride. I think it's expensive, I said. I walked into the conference room. Silas was there, along with the board members on a video screen. The external consultants were huddled in the corner, looking defeated. I stood at the head of the table, kept my hands in my pockets, and smiled. You wanted to trim the budget, I said. So, let's talk budget. 14. Silas stood up and offered his hand. I didn't shake it. Caleb, we want to offer you your old job back, Silas said. We'll give you a 10% raise. We'll forget this ever happened. I laughed. It was a genuine, hearty laugh. I don't want a job, Silas. I don't want to work for Julian. I am a consultant now. My rate is $2,000 an hour. The room gasped. Julian slammed his hand on the table. That's extortion. You can't charge that. I shrugged. That's the rate. Plus, I require a minimum 40-hour retainer paid up front. And a $50,000 emergency call-out fee. That's over $100,000. Julian screamed. For typing in a password. No, I corrected him. It's for knowing which password to type. And for fixing the mess your cheap consultants made. I turned to the door. If that's too much fat for your budget, I'm happy to go home. Good luck with the brute force. 15. I walked toward the elevator. My heart was thumping. It was a gamble. If they let me leave, I walked away with nothing. I heard my own footsteps echoing on the polished floor. I pressed the call button for the elevator. I counted down in my head. 3, 2. The elevator dinged. The doors slid open. 1. Wait. Silas screamed from the conference room. I stopped. I turned around slowly. Silas was standing in the doorway, his face pale. Julian looked like he was about to vomit. We'll pay it, Silas said. We'll pay it all. Just fix the damn system. I smiled. Contract first. Wire transfer second. Then, and only then, do I touch a keyboard. 16. It took an hour for the legal team to draft the consulting agreement. I sat in the conference room, eating a sandwich I had brought from home, making them watch me chew while they scrambled. I read every single word of the contract. I made them change a clause about liability. I made them add a clause that indemnified me from any damage caused by the previous team. Finally, I signed. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Send the wire, I said. Silas made the call to finance. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Deposit received, $130,000. The money was real. It was more than I made in a year and a half. I stood up, wiped the crumbs off my t-shirt, and looked at the terrified executives. All right, I said. Let's go to work. 17. I walked into the server room, flanked by Silas, Julian, and the external team. The consultants were watching me like hawks, expecting me to write lines of complex code or perform some digital wizardry. They had their notepads ready. I walked up to the main terminal. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, black security token. Julian's eyes widened. He recognized it. It had been in my bag the day he fired me. I plugged the token into the USB port. The terminal beeped. A prompt appeared, enter security code. I looked at the token. The digital numbers shifted. 842910. I typed the 6 digits into the keyboard and hit enter. The screens on the wall instantly flickered. The red critical failure banners vanished, replaced by soothing green text. Authentication verified. System restored. The hum of the servers changed pitch as the drive spun back up. It had taken exactly 30 seconds. The external consultants dropped their jaws. 18. The data was back, but the tension in the room skyrocketed. Julian saw an opening. He pointed a shaking finger at me. See, he had a device on him. He held the system hostage. He turned to Silas, desperate to shift the narrative. He took the key home. That's theft. That's criminal extortion. We should have the security guards detain him right now until he returns the money. The 2 guards at the door stepped forward, unsure. I didn't flinch. I looked at Silas, who was watching me closely. I didn't steal anything, Silas, I said calmly. I took my personal effects. This token was assigned to me. I was escorted out before I could hand it over. But if you want to talk about crimes, let's check the server logs. 19. I pulled up the system audit trail on the big screen for everyone to see. It was a timeline of the disaster. Look here, I pointed. Midnight. The system requested the code. No input. That's when the deadlock triggered. I scrolled down. Here. 10 a.m. yesterday. Failed login attempts from Julian's administrative account. He tried to bypass the protocol. I scrolled further. And here. The external team. This command right here. This is what triggered the fragmentation. They attacked the firewall. I turned to face them. I didn't hold the system hostage. I didn't type a single command. I just didn't come to work to turn the key. Because you fired me. My inactivity didn't break the system, your incompetence did. Silas looked at the logs. The evidence was undeniable. 20. I turned back to the screen to run a diagnostic. I frowned. Wait. I typed a quick command. A new error window popped up. The room went cold. The system is unlocked, I said, my voice serious. But about 15% of the customer database is corrupted. Julian gasped. You said you fixed it. I unlocked the door, I said. But the external team smashed the furniture while they were trying to break in. The brute force attack scrambled the index. We have the data, but the system doesn't know who it belongs to. You can't bill clients. You can't route trucks. The external consultants looked at their shoes. This was a disaster within a disaster. 21. The blame game started immediately. Julian started screaming at the consultants. I'm not paying you. You broke it. The lead consultant shouted back, we followed your orders. You said it was a virus. Silas rubbed his temples, looking like he was about to have a stroke. Can it be fixed? He asked me. I sat back in the expensive ergonomic chair and spun around slowly. I can restore the index, I said. I have to manually map the fragmented shards back to the core table. It's tedious work. Silas looked hopeful. Great. Do it. I shook my head. No, the contract I just signed. That was for system access restoration. That job is done. Data recovery is a separate project. It wasn't in the scope. 22. I reached into my bag and pulled out a second contract I had prepared in the car. I slid it across the table to Silas. Data restoration services. Silas looked at the fee. I had doubled the rate. $4,000 an hour. Julian looked like he was going to explode. You can't do this. This is robbery. This is supply and demand, Julian, I said coldly. You have the demand. I have the supply. I looked at Silas. You can hire the guys who broke it to fix it, or you can hire the guy who built it. Silas didn't hesitate. He pulled out a pen and signed the document. Just get it done, he whispered. I was now making more money in 2 days than I would have made in 5 years of employment. 23. I spent the next 12 hours working in the server room. It was quiet. While I was re-indexing the database, I had full access to the back-end logs that Julian thought were deleted. I started digging. I wanted to know why he was so eager to fire me in the first place. I found it buried in a subdirectory. Julian had been downloading proprietary client lists for weeks before the crash. Massive files containing pricing models, contact info, and routing data. He had been transferring them to a private cloud server. The realization hit me. He wasn't trimming the fat. He was planning to steal the company's data and start his own competing logistics firm. He fired me because I monitored the data traffic. I was the witness he needed to remove. 24. I finished the restore at 8 a.m. the next morning. The company was back online. Trucks were moving. Money was flowing. The board of directors had convened in the boardroom to debrief. Silas and Julian were there. I walked in, looking exhausted but triumphant. It's fixed, I said. Good, Julian snapped. Now get out. Not yet, I said. I plugged my laptop into the projector. I found the root cause of the restructuring. I projected Julian's download history onto the main wall. Huge file transfers to an external drive. Timestamps. The IP address of his private server. Here is your fat trimming, I said to the board. He wasn't saving budget. He was stealing the client list. He caused this crash to cover his tracks while he looted the ship. 25. The room turned on Julian instantly. Silas stood up, his face purple with rage. Is this true? He roared. Julian tried to stammer a denial, but the logs didn't lie. You're fired, Silas said. And don't leave the building. The police are on their way. We're pressing charges for corporate espionage. Julian was escorted out by the same security guards who had walked me out days earlier. He looked small, defeated, and terrified. Silas turned to me. Caleb, please. Stay. We'll make you CTO. Name your salary. I looked at the office, the stress, and the politics. I looked at the check in my pocket. No thanks, Silas, I said. I like being a consultant. I walked out of the building into the bright morning sun. I had my reputation, a massive payout, and the freedom I never knew I wanted. The fat had been trimmed, and it turned out the fat was the boss.